Good afternoon. I've been hearing about the Gorge for at least a decade. Viento runs and epic swells and nonstop current going the other way, just creating wave after wave after wave with nuking winds and just insane conditions. So I'm beyond stoked to report that all my expectations were not only met, but exceeded. I am just over the moon. I've been telling people even so far as I've been kind of ruined. I don't want to go anywhere else now. The big hurdle or limiter for me was always the drive, logistics, getting there. And on the way up, it was so hot. The wind shut down, the hottest day. So it's like I had to detour to the coast. Didn't even get that far. Just seems like everything's changing. Our winds in the Bay Area the past couple of years have been so fluky. That was another thing that just pushed me over the edge. Let's go. Let's get out of here. It's just not working. And the sheer scale of the Columbia River and the whole gorge just blew my mind. I've seen tons of videos on the actual gorge. And for some reason, the scale or just the setup of the whole thing somehow escaped me. I just couldn't get a feel for what I was getting into until I actually got there and saw it, and just driving up from Portland and seeing the just sheer size of everything. And I hadn't even considered all the volcanic area and all these big mountains and St. Helens. And it just somehow didn't register until actually being here and seeing it. And then feeling all this anxiety, like anxiousness of like, oh, what's it going to be like? Is it going to be hard like Chrissy? Is it going to be easy? Is it going to be huge and intimidating? Like, what's it going to be like? And where do I go if I get stuck? The current going the opposite way of the wind. What happens if I pick the wrong wing or something changes and I'm getting sucked upriver? Like, where do I get out? What do I do? So after like the initial jitters wore off and I get up, manage to get across the river, I'm like, oh, wow, this is like easy. It's big and it's windy, but it's easy. It seems so easy. I've never been to a spot where like the swell is pumping and so good and so rideable. And it's so easy. Just boom, straight into it, riding waves. And then getting back upwind is so easy. And then boom, back down on. I am just so stoked. I only scored a couple days, just logistics and everything, and my legs were cooked, and I could only imagine how like wrecked my body would be if I was there for an entire week, just getting unbelievable conditions, or one of those like nuking days that the Chrissy guys were telling me about, where they had to be careful making a turn because the wind was so strong they would get knocked over, and it was just so huge. I can only imagine. I mean, it's such a incredible setup. And speaking of setups, it got me thinking. Like Chrissy guys come up here for a month, 2 months. Chrissy gets funky in the summer. It's just not that good sometimes, or the inside is completely shut down, or it's just inconsistent. And so why not be semi-nomadic? Like why stick around where it's not good when you can just make a short drive? And not only is the cost of living cheaper, but the conditions are way better and you don't have to wear a wetsuit. And like, why not? I've heard stories over the year of people doing Hood River in the summer and then say the islands or Mexico or something like that in the winter, and then going say to the fall in the Bay Area where it's surf is epic and it's beautiful conditions, and then the spring maybe in the Bay Area too. That kind of like, why stick around where it's no good or where it's a hard way of life when you can just pick up and go somewhere that's way better? And if I ask that question in earnest and I think about it, it's either liabilities like mortgage, something like that, or have kids in school or family or friends. And then if we look at historically, like my understanding is traditional societies like tribes, villages, hunter-gatherers, they had a summer camp and they had a winter camp. They didn't stick around in the valley or someplace hot and miserable where it's 110 degrees every day and it's just dry and there's no food. They're not stupid. They would pick up and go somewhere where it was better. And because they had everything they needed with them, they had their people, they had their elders, their babysitters, their homes, everything. They could just pick up and go and take it with them. It didn't feel like they were leaving anything behind, or like didn't have this like, oh, how am I going to pay the bills and how am I going to have multiple houses? And they didn't have to think about any of that. They just took it with them and it was all good. And as I've been transitioning out of a surfing mindset of seeing the winter as go where the winter swells are, northern hemisphere oriented, and instead switching to more of a wind oriented mindset. And I hear from wind people in the Bay, it's like, spring is the place to be in the Bay. It nukes most of the time, the weather's pleasant, the water's, it's cold, but it's getting warmer. And then summer, it gets funky. So why not go to Hood? And then come fall, it's like the Bay Area is beautiful. Go back to the Bay. And then come winter, it's like, cold and gray. Who wants to be in Hood or in the Bay? Like, why not go to Hawaii or wherever? Go down to Mexico. Like it just, and this is the pattern that people follow. Like my friends in the Bay disappear for months at a time, and they go to these places, and they take their people with them. So it's like such a interesting way of living. But then, when I get the historical context of, say, like the natives of this place and other places where this is how they lived. When it got cold, they went someplace warmer with more food, or if it got hot and miserable, they went someplace cooler. They didn't have any constraints or any attachment. They didn't feel trapped in some like rat race kind of thing where they couldn't leave. They could just pick up and take it with them. And they didn't have to worry about permits or anything. They were free, like actually free. And for me, that's what carving turns is all about. It's freedom. I see a wave face. I see people carving like this, and I think in my head of how I want to carve. I have these visions when I see a wave face. It's like an open canvas, and I imagine myself doing lines and the turns I'm going to do. And then when it's not available, when there's no bumps or when it's flat, I get kind of bummed out because the vision, the expression, the thing I want to do, I can't do it because the canvas isn't there. And with the gorge, there's just so much size and power every day. And with the ebb or the river flowing opposite, it creates more swell all the time. A huge shift for me from the Bay Area where we have to time our sessions around like a 2-hour window where the swell's good. And then after that, it totally flattens out. And here, like a motorized contraption, gear, whatever you want to call it, like this makes 100% more sense. It's just doable. There's just the canvas. And he was saying that when the winds kind of die on the inside, but there's still swell, it gets super clean. And he just has these beautiful open faces all over the place to carve. And there's still swell because there's wind, upwind, still creating swell. And just, so it's like amazing. And as we were making the voyage up, we drove through about an hour of thick smoke, mid-90s degree weather, dry, just nothing around. All I could think about is like, who would want to live here? And how terrible it would be to have to like stop here and just live in this thick smoke and miserable conditions. Then to have the freedom just to go an hour further and it's clear and it's beautiful and pristine. So it is like a van life, getting off the reservation, as they say. Is that the future, or going back to the future, or back to the past, bringing it forward, getting away from being trapped in whatever's going on with this kind of change in the world? And that if it gets crazy, we can just go pick up and go to some pristine place like this, not being chained to the place, being free to go wherever we want, to be where it's beautiful, get all our needs met, take all our people with us. So let's go. Come on, I'm ready. So thanks for watching. I hope this was fun to watch. I had so much fun on this trip. Just unbelievable and great company, and met a lot of great people. So I'm stoked and hope to see you out there soon. And, check out the website. Got lots of good stuff in there, lessons, all the videos on how to foil and the t-shirt and how to use tools to live in this good way, have good relationships and harmonious with nature and each other and with ourselves. So thanks so much. And I hope to see you real soon.